everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Let's just jump right into this, because I bet when you hear the words buried treasure, your mind goes straight to one legendary figure, Captain Kidd, right? For over 300 years, the myth of Captain William Kidd has completely captivated treasure hunters and storytellers everywhere. We all pictured the swashbuckling villain burying chests of gold on deserted islands. But today, we're going to dig into the actual historical record and uncover a true story that is far more tragic and honestly, way more fascinating than any of the myths. So the myth really kicked off with catchy lines just like this. 200 bars of gold and Rick's dollars manifold we seized uncontrolled. That is from a wildly popular broadside ballad from 1701 called Captain Kidd's Farewell to the Seas. It was printed right around the time of his execution, and it firmly established that enduring pop culture image we have of Kidd as a ruthless, treasure-hoarding pirate terrorizing the high seas. I mean, this song basically invented the pirate trope as we know it. But how much of it was actually true? We'll take a look at his actual portrait. This stark contrast totally shatters the pirate myth, doesn't it? We are definitely not looking at a ragged buccaneer with a parrot on his shoulder here. This is William Kidd in reality, a highly respected, wig-wearing, incredibly wealthy citizen of New York. He married one of the wealthiest widows in the city, and he even financially backed the construction of Trinity Church. Kidd was absolutely not a pirate. He was a highly successful, state-sponsored privateer. Think of him essentially as a legal, armed mercenary who was hired specifically to protect English interests. So how exactly does a wealthy New York citizen end up at the end of a hangman's rope? That brings us to Section 1, the Royal Pirate Hunter. Okay, so in 1695, Kidd's life takes a fateful turn. He gets a royal commission from the Earl of Bellamont, who was the governor of New York, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire at the time. Bellamont essentially asks Kidd to hunt down notorious pirates and enemy French ships in the Indian Ocean. And the political stakes of this voyage were absolutely massive. King William III of England personally authorized this mission with a letter of marque. And get this, the king himself reserved a 10% cut of the loot. The rest of it was bankrolled by some of the most powerful lords and statesmen in all of England. So Kidd wasn't some rogue sailor. He was the point man for a highly speculative, high-stakes corporate venture backed by the absolute highest levels of the British government. Now, to execute a grand mission like that, Kidd obviously needed a serious ship. Enter the Adventure Galley. Weighing in at 284 tons and boasting 34 cannons, she was literally a purpose-built pirate hunting machine. But notice a really crucial tactical advantage here. She was equipped with oars, so if the winds died down, pirate ships would just be dead in the water, but the Adventure Galley could just roll right up to them. He personally handpicked a crew of 150 of his best, most loyal officers for the job. He was primed for total success. But things fall apart quickly. Let's move to Section 2, a disastrous, mutinous voyage. Almost immediately after leaving port, this grand plan began to unravel in ways Kidd never could have anticipated, and it all started with a bizarrely petty incident on the River Thames. Kidd unaccountably failed to salute a Royal Navy yacht, which was a major custom at the time. The yacht fired a warning shot, and Kidd's crew essentially mooned the Navy in response. Yeah, really. So the Navy captain retaliated by pressing the vast majority of Kidd's hand-picked crew right into naval service. Left totally short-handed, Kidd had to sail back to New York to find replacements. And who do you think was available for hire in New York? Hardened criminals, smugglers, and former pirates. His loyal crew was gone. They were replaced by a ticking time bomb. Let's map out exactly how this disaster played out on a timeline. They officially set sail in September 1696. By late 1696, a horrible outbreak of cholera in the Comoros Islands killed off a full third of his crew. On top of that, his brand new ship was leaking terribly, and they just couldn't find any of the pirates they were supposed to be hunting. The whole venture was failing, and this replacement crew was constantly threatening mutiny because, well, they weren't getting paid. All of this tension finally boiled over in October 1697, leading directly to his infamous capture of a massive prize in early 1698. So that October 1697 boiling point is known today as the Fatal Bucket Incident. A Dutch ship appeared on the horizon, and Kidd's gunner, a man named William Moore, aggressively urged Kidd to attack it. But here's the catch. England wasn't at war with the Dutch. Attacking them wouldn't be a legal capture, it would be an act of piracy. Kidd flat out refused, and a furious argument broke out. In the heat of the moment, Kidd grabbed an iron-bound bucket, threw it, and fractured Moore's skull,
ultimately killing him. The really crucial takeaway here is this. Kidd literally killed his own man, specifically to prevent an act of piracy. And yet, crazily enough, this would be the very murder he'd later hang for.
Which brings us to the climax of our story in Section 3, Betrayal and the Gallows. In January 1698, Kidd finally struck it big. He captured the massive 400-ton Quetagam merchant, which was loaded down with unbelievably valuable silks, gold, and silver. But this capture actually turned Kidd into England's most wanted man, leading to a fascinating legal contradiction. When word reached London, the prosecutions immediately labeled him a ruthless pirate terrorizing the seas. But Kidd's defense was completely different. See, the Quetagam merchant was hired by Armenian merchants and captained by an Englishman, sure, but that captain had purchased protection passes from the French East India Company. Since England was at war with France, Kidd genuinely believed these French passes made the ship a completely legal prize of war, and he kept those passes as the ultimate proof of his innocence. However, the political winds back home had violently shifted. The powerful Whig lords who funded his journey were suddenly under political fire, and they desperately needed a scapegoat. Enter Governor Bellamont, Kidd's very own wealthy backer. Terrified of being implicated in piracy himself, Bellamont lured Kidd to Boston using completely false promises of clemency. The second Kidd arrived, Bellamont had him arrested and thrown straight into solitary confinement. Kidd was eventually shipped back to London, where he was left to rot in the disgusting hellhole of Newgate Prison for nearly 2 whole years. Kidd's trial was an absolute sham. He was denied legal counsel until the very morning of the trial, and somehow his defense funds were conveniently misplaced. He was convicted and sentenced to die at execution dock in Wapping. The execution itself, taking place in 1701, was just a gruesome spectacle. Someone actually took pity on him and gave him enough alcohol that he arrived at the gallows thoroughly drunk. And amazingly, the hangman's rope actually snapped on the very first try, but there was no divine pardon for William Kidd. They simply strung him up again minutes later. Then, to serve as a terrifying warning to any future pirates, his body was placed in an iron cage, a gibbet, and left to rot over the River Thames for 3 long years. And here is the ultimate gut-wrenching tragedy of this entire explainer. Remember those French passes Kidd kept to prove the Quetagam merchant was a legal capture? They mysteriously vanished during his trial. His wealthy backers actively suppressed the evidence just to cover their own tracks and ensure Kidd took the fall for all of them. Those exact passes actually resurfaced in the early 20th century, completely misfiled in a London government building. The very documents that could have saved Captain Kidd's life were real all along. Which leaves us with the aftermath. Section 4, the myth lives on. See, while the real William Kidd was silenced by the state, his legend was literally just getting started. Because Kidd knew he was a wanted man before his arrest, he actually did bury a small cache of treasure on Gardiner's Island in New York, hoping to use it as a bargaining chip to save his life. Governor Bellamont quickly found it, of course, but that single grain of truth sparked a centuries-long global frenzy. People have spent lifetimes searching for his fictional, massive hoards on Oak Island in Nova Scotia, Charles Island in Connecticut, and even as far away as Phu Quoc Island in Vietnam, where treasure hunters were actually imprisoned in the 1980s just for digging around. It's really incredible how one small, very real cache of treasure turned a betrayed privateer into the ultimate mythical pirate. So I want to leave you with this final thought as we wrap up our explainer for today. Was Captain William Kidd truly the ruthless pirate that the ballads and pop culture claim he is? Or was he simply history's ultimate political scapegoat, sacrificed by powerful men just to protect their own wealth and reputations? It definitely makes you wonder how much of the history we accept as fact is just a narrative written by those who held the power. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the legends.